Bethjordan, just watched swimming, about to do my EAPI. One strength for our skill was his transition phase. This was because when he was doing from fly to back, back to breast and breast to front crawl, it was very smooth when it was stop-starting, meaning he didn't lose any momentum and he could carry on the speed into the next length. Another strength skill was his start underwater. This is because he had very tight streamline, which meant he had his arms up ahead of him with no gap between his arms and head, which showed that it was tight, and he had very strong fly kick, which came from his rectus abdominals, which is a fixator. Another skill strength was going into the turns. This was because he knew exactly when to do his last stroke and when to bring his arm down to have a quick fast turn, and his legs were in the correct position, which is around 90-degree angle on his feet on the wall to then push off. This is because he's an associative performer, which means that he will store some motor programs but still make it is still trial and error and make some mistakes as seen later on, as he is not yet an autonomous performer, which is where they have trained for around 10 years or done 10,000 hours. Overall, by him having good start, it means that he could get away underwater, could mean that he could get away quickly with fast underwater work, and by knowing when to go into turns and having good transition phase allows him to not alter his stroke and allowing it to be smooth and then get away back into the next length. A tactic strength was the awareness of his position. This was because he stayed in middle of the lane throughout the race, which is good instead of because if he was too close to the lane rope, he could end up hitting his hand, and this could alter his stroke because it will throw him off if he hits the lane rope. But also he won't be able to get the waves a splash if competitors next to him was in front, allowing him to have smooth water to swim on. Another tactic strength was his awareness of rules. This is because he didn't move on the block after the official had said take your marks, and he didn't go past 15 metres underwater, meaning that his time counted. Another tactic strength was knowing when to turn. This because he knew exactly when to go with no glide or being too close, meaning he wasn't over 90 degrees angle, and by him not having to glide in means that he didn't lose any momentum and could carry on the speed into the next length. Overall, by him knowing the rules, it enables his time to be counted, which could go towards nationals or Olympic trials. And by knowing his position, it allows him not to catch his hands or slowing down or be swimming over top of waves, and by knowing when to turn means that he doesn't lose speed from gliding for too long. One fitness strength was his coordination. This was because when he breathed, he had to coordinate his breathing to his upper and lower body parts. This is because when he had to breathe to the side, he needed to make sure that his arms and legs did not disrupt their technique. Because when some people breathe, it causes their arm to come higher up and further over instead of doing over like when they normally do. So by having good coordination, it enabled him to have smooth technique throughout the race. Another fitness strength was his muscular endurance. This is because he did a repetitive action for a period of time without fatiguing completely, enabling him to finish the race with a good sprint, which it shows that he did do. So it shows that you that he has good muscular strength by finishing the race without completely fatiguing. Another fitness strength was his body composition. This was because he can seem to be lean, which could mean he has good diet of around 65% carbohydrates, 20% fat and 15% protein, which is good for an athlete. And he needs to have good carbohydrates and fats and proteins because it is an aerobic energy system, because he's using oxygen as it is submaximal and lasts over 3 minutes. And the aerobic energy system uses glycogen or fats, and it's broken down into glucose, and then it goes into like the Krebs cycle, which is in the matrix of the mitochondria, and then the hydrogen ions go into the electron transport chain, which is in the cristae of the mitochondria. So it shows that he has enough carbohydrates to finish a race. Overall, by him having a good body composition, it means that he doesn't have any extra weight to carry, so he doesn't have to use more energy to overcome his weight to go faster. And by having good coordination means that he doesn't alter his stroke and can carry on with his technique properly. And by having good muscular endurance enables him to finish the race comfortably and without fatigue, which enabled him to have a sprint finish. However, though, he had some weaknesses, as he isn't an autonomous performer yet. And one skill weakness was his breathing technique. This was because on front crawl he breathed every 2 and on fly every 1, meaning that he is disrupting his stroke more by instead of having his head down, so his arms can come over his head quicker and reducing his cross-sectional area and his streamline. Another skill weakness was his stroke rate. This was seen on backstroke because he didn't have quick arms. They were at a moderate pace, meaning he wasn't propelling himself forward with his arms quick enough in the water, and would be wasting energy and falling behind. Another skill weakness was going out of turns. This is because he didn't travel 15 metres on any of his turns out of the water, and this is the fastest point of the race, meaning that he is losing crucial speed and where he could pull up on the person in front of him. Overall, by them having incorrect breathing technique of doing breathing every 2 or 1, for example, he could do every 3 or 5 on front crawl and then like every 4 or 5 on fly. And by him breathing alternate sides on front crawl, it would motivate them if they see the person in front to catch up, and this can be linked to personality, because if they are type A, they are very competitive and so would want to catch up to the person in front. And by them not using their turns to go 15 metres fully, it means that they fall behind and then have to use more energy to catch back up. And by having a slow stroke rate, they'll be using unnecessary energy when they could use it, for example on breaststroke when he wasn't as fast as the others. One tactic weakness was knowing how far to travel underwater, because he can go 15 metres, but I've seen he goes around 10 and then even less than that when he does front crawl turns. And as I said earlier, this is a negative thing because the streamline underwater part of the race is the fastest, most crucial point, as it is where the cross-section area is at its lowest and where the speed from the wall is at its highest. After that, then you start to slow down. Another tactic weakness was his sprint start, because even though he had good underwater work, once he came up, he didn't have a quick, maybe even one length at the most, but he didn't even do 10 metres quick, like few stroke rates, meaning that he wasn't out front with the rest, and it was a bit further behind, meaning that he was behind from the first part of the race and then had to catch up. Another tactic weakness was his timing of breathing, because as I said earlier, he'll either do it every 2 or 4, but then he'll over rotate as well. This is when more than half the face comes out of the water and then past the shoulder, so meaning that the more water will be hitting the body and so slowing him down. Yeah. So, and then overall, by not using the full 15 metres underwater, means that he'll lose speed and then have to catch back up. Same with the sprint start, because he's behind, so putting himself at a disadvantage when he could have been out front with the others. But by him having incorrect timing of breathing, means that will stop him, will make his stroke take longer to come over, so slowing down his stroke rate again. One fitness weakness was his power. This can be seen off the wall when he is from when he is turned, but also off the block. This is because he hasn't got enough like type 2B muscle fibre types, which have the largest contraction type. So he needs to work on this and build up more, instead of maybe having type 2A, but they can be changed from 2A to 2B. He also had a weakness. Another fitness weakness was his reaction time. This is because he can be seen to be slow off the block, only by milliseconds, but that is crucial when you're reacting to get into the pool. This puts him straight at a disadvantage because he is behind already. Another fitness weakness was his strength, as can be seen on his backstroke arms, because he hasn't got enough strength to propel himself forward in the water, meaning he's having to use more energy in doing more strokes to try and work up for the energy built in what he could do if he had good strength in his arms. Overall, by having a slow reaction time, he's having to use energy to catch back up, and same to do with his power and strength, because he is not using his abilities to his advantage, so slowing down and having to catch back up. This would increase his lactic acid quicker because he's using more energy than he has to. For his training program, I am going to work on his power and underwater work, as they work together, and it is the most crucial part of the race, as it is the fastest point. So by doing power and underwater work together, it will improve his the amount of how big the contraction is off the wall, and how strong the fly kicks are when he is in streamline position. The training program will be 2 to 3 months long to allow the adaptations to take place, because the body needs to overlearn the skill to start storing motor programs in the long-term memory, which is the multi-style memory model done by Atkinson and Schifrin, which says you have to repeat and rehearse just to store it in a long-term memory. So by storing the motor programs, when it comes to a race, he will automatically know what to do, and this would help with the whole drive theory, because his dominant response will now be correct, and so as is because his dominant response is more likely to be correct, his arousal will increase, and so will the dominant response, enabling him to be more motivated as he knows he's achieving and doing well. Fit is frequency, intensity, time and type, and he will do it 2 to 5 sessions per week, along with a normal training program, and it would be 15 to 30 minutes long, because power takes a lot of can damage the body a lot, so it is done in a lesser time frame to allow the body to recover. Before each training program, he would do a warm-up, and this would consist of either jogging if he's in a gym session or swimming, and then doing a sport-specific movement by either doing some squats or doing some kick in the warm-up, and then by stretching afterwards to make sure the muscles are prepared and ready to work. After each training program, he would also do a cool down. This is to make sure the heart rate is still increased, so vasodilating to the muscles still, allowing oxygen to go to the muscles, reducing the amount of lactic acid present, and this can help reduce DOMS, which is delayed onset muscle soreness. By having lower DOMS levels, it means that that he can get back into training quicker without feeling as fatigued and sore. This can be sped up by the recovery can be sped up by using ice baths, which is where you get in an ice bath and the body vasodilates to the centre of the body, meaning when you climb out, then it'll vasodilate to the external limbs and flushing out all the lactic acid. And by doing a cool down, it enables the fast component of EPOC to take place, which is taking an extra 3 to 4 litres of oxygen, but also resynthesizing ATP and PC stores, and also replenishing myoglobin to be ready for the next exercise and training session, either the next day or in the afternoon if it was a morning training session. The training program is going to be done into a macrocycle of 3 months, and then there'll be mesocycles of 3-4 weeks. So there'll be week 1 to 4, then week 4 to 8, and then week 8 to 12. And in them weeks there will be microcycles, which are a week long. In the first week, which is week 1 to 4, he will do 6 to 8 swimming sessions with 2 gym. And then in week 4 to 8, he'll do 8 to 10 swimming sessions with 2 gym. And then week 8 to 12, he'll do 10 to 12 swimming sessions and then 2 gym as well. And then as there is more than 7, which is the 7 days in a week, he will have to do some morning sessions beforehand. And as the weeks go on, he will start to become stronger, and so the repetitions or the sets will increase or the times will decrease. The first 2 training programs I'm about to speak about will be done in 1 swimming session, and then the last 2 training programs will be done in 1 swimming session, because the sets don't take that long so it can be done in one training session, and then the others can be dedicated to even continue increasing cardiovascular endurance and muscular endurance to make sure that keeps up to a high standard. So the first training part would be a squat lift. This is where he will do 6 reps of 3 sets, and he'll have 3 minutes rest. He will have the bar over his shoulder, and to work out the amount of weight to start off to begin with, he would have done a 1 rep max, which I'll talk about later in the measurement section. And so to begin with, he will start around 80% and see how comfortable it feels, and so he'll do 6 reps of 8% worth of his 1 rep max. So the bar would be across his shoulders, and he needs to ensure that his feet are shoulder width apart with his back straight to reduce the chance of injuries, like jarring his back or neck, or tearing muscles in his back region, and then would then could put him out of training. And then he would lose his adaptations that he might have already taken place. But if he did injure himself, he could use PRISE, which is protect, rest, ice, compress, elevate, or compress or be comfortable. Or he could use painkillers like ibuprofen or paracetamol. So he needs to make sure his back straight, feet shoulder width apart, and has a good grip on the bar. And then when he's placing it back onto the bar, he needs to make sure he does it carefully without dropping on himself, but he can have someone help him with this if he needs to. When he's doing the set, he needs to have extrinsic motivation, because it is which will come from a coach or teammates, by using tangible or intangible methods. Which tangible is like rewards, medals, trophies, money, and intangible is praise and acknowledgement of what he is doing. And it is needed because it is a very hard and demanding set, so he needs to needs to be motivated to carry on while he's doing it. Extrinsic feedback would also be used by a coach, by making sure the technique is correct, or that the technique is correct, or if he needs to adapt how his feet are, or if they are maybe pointed out too much, as they can, because depending on the type of squat, feet can be straight or they can be a 90-degree angle, so they need to be in the correct position. Persuasive communication can also be used to by using a role model to highlight the importance of why they're doing it, and it needs to be done at the correct time. So that he might have someone, the coach might get someone in the club that he looks up to, and so and he will emphasise why he is doing the set and the importance of it. The second training program would be to do a deadlift, and this he'll do 6 reps again for 3 sets, and then having a 3 minutes rest to allow recovery. When he's doing the deadlift, the bar will be out in front of him, and again he'll probably have around 80% of his 1 rep max on it. And when he's doing it, he needs to make sure, depending on the type of deadlift, that his feet are either shoulder width apart, or if he's doing a sumo deadlift, his feet are wider than his shoulders. But he'll do a normal deadlift to begin with, and sumo deadlift may do later on, the adaptations are going well. When he's doing the set, he again needs to be motivated and know the reasons and the importance of doing it. And verbal and visual guidance can be used by the coach by demonstrating himself or showing a video with someone and explaining how they are doing the technique and the skill, and highlighting the key aspects of it. He needs to make sure it is not long though, and to only give important information so that he can remember. Slow-mo technology can also be used easily in today's society by either recording him and then showing him where to improve or if he's doing well, but also getting a role model and showing how they are doing it step by step. But this is generally used in today's society, but in pre-1850 this was not used because there was lack of technology and then so they couldn't use it. Another training program to work on the underwater work would be to do underwater streamline. This is where he will have arms above his head in a very tight grip, so there is zero space to see clear water, but either between his neck but also between his arms above his head, because genuinely quite a lot of people don't tense and do it tight. People break up and this will slow them down, so the coach will maybe even get him out of the water, getting it into the correct position to show him how and how it's done on himself, and then he'll get in the water and do it. So he's going to do underwater streamline and do 10-25 metres on 45 seconds. To begin with, he will only do 15 metres underwater and then just normal kick for the rest of it, or swim depending on the set, to work with being with as it is 50 metres that he is allowed to go to. So by working to that, he will get used to the feeling of 15 metres, and he is gradually going to increase, because he can't just go to 25 metres if he can't do 15, so he needs to start 15 metres first. But when he's doing the streamline kick as well, he needs to make sure that his fly kicks are coming from his abdominals and that they are strong and powerful. He will need to use intrinsic motivation here because it is a boring set, so he needs to tell himself why he's doing it and the importance of it. Maybe it's to tell himself that he's going to reach the nationals or the Olympics, and this can be helped by using SMART targets, which is specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and time bound. So if he sets these, he can see why he's doing it and then aim to achieve these goals, and you'll have either short, medium, long term goals to reach. He can also, because of globalisation in today, there is a wide range of media and coverage, like media coverage and technology that he can use. So he can go on like YouTube, for example, and watch demonstrations himself of how they are doing the fly kick and why it's being done, to encourage him to carry on doing it. The last training program would be to do fly kick either on his front, back or side, and to start with, he'd do 14-25s on 45 seconds, and again he'll have to make sure this is to improve on his fly kick itself, and he needs to make sure that the fly kick is coming from the abdominals again, and that he's flicking his toes at the end to have the full rhythm. He needs to make sure he's not kicking from his knees, because this is only half the movement and it's not using the power, for example, from his rectus femoris or biceps femoris. He's only using his tibialis anterior and gastrocnemius. And manual guidance would also be used by if he's doing kick on his front, because he can use a kickboard. So this would all be done in weeks 1 to 4, and then adaptations will take place depending on if he is doing well, or if it needs to be made a bit easier. But then in weeks 4 to 8, for the squat and the deadlift, he can increase for 8 reps for 3 sets, so you can do 6 reps for 4 sets. But you can also decrease the amount of rest he is having, because for going from 3 minutes to 2 minutes, he'll make his body more fatigued quicker. So if he does this, his body will get used to it, and then he'll so when it comes to racing, his body will know what it feels like to be fatigued, and he'll overcome this. And then doing underwater fly kick and kick either on front, back and side, this can be changed to, for the underwater kick, he'll do from 10-25 metres to 14-25 metres. But he'll also go from doing 15 metres underwater to 20 metres underwater, and then just swim for the rest of it. So he's then pushing that distance instead. And then 45 seconds can be decreased to 40 or 35 depending on how easy and hard he's finding it. And then the fly kick on the front, back and side can be changed to 18-25s. And then again with the 45 seconds can be decreased on the time. And then in week 8 to 12, the squat and deadlift can be increased to 10 reps of 3 sets, or doing 8 reps of 4 sets, or even it can go even harder than that if he's feeling that he has got even more powerful, by going up to 12, or going from 2 minutes rest to 1 minute 30, or even 1 minute. This will help him in a race because he can work. He knows that he's trained hard with lactic acid in his body and feeling fatigued, so when he feels it in a race, he knows he can overcome it and carry on and finish. And then underwater streamline can be up to 18-25s, and then this will definitely decrease time to around 30 seconds, because he'll get used to going and then going, but also it'll go from 20 metres underwater streamline to 25 metres underwater streamline with no breathing, because he knows he can make that. So when it comes to a race, he knows he can definitely now do 15 metres underwater without breathing. And then fly kick on front, back or side, he will go to around 22-25s, and again on 30 seconds. So they are the adaptations that can take place with this training program, but he needs to make sure that even though he might be struggling to begin with, he needs to know that it will get easier as he gets stronger. So he might have to make the reps like lower and the time higher, but he knows that he will soon have to increase it as he gets stronger. These will be measured before and after by using force plates, which is where you can which measures your force and power from your legs, like either by doing a jump or on it. And so by doing this before and afterwards, it can show how much power has increased in his rectus femoris or his gastrocnemius. And then he will do a 1 rep max before and afterwards. This is where you can rep the maximum amount that you can, and this can be, you should be able to increase this before and afterwards as well. And then a vertical jump can still be done before and afterwards. This is where you put your arm against the wall, measure it, mark it off, and then do a vertical jump upwards, mark it on the wall, and then you can see how far you can jump. And this is done before and afterwards to show an increase in the power of his legs. If he continues to increase his power, he can go to a he can identify by a talent identification. This is done by Sir Chris Oy, and it is where you go to a general training day, and if you have good power, you can be chosen to a sport suitable to you. And if he's lucky, he might be given swimming, so he can carry on that. But maybe he might go to either long jump, because that uses power in the thighs, or basketball, for example. And then will be phases that he goes through, but he may feel the pressure to increase his power, and may end up using ergogenical aids, which is like, for example, anabolic steroids, which increases muscle mass and power, but it will increase infertility, and it is illegal. And there's WADA, which is World Anti-Doping Agency, which can test an athlete randomly at any time, and if he is tested positive, he will get a 2-year ban. He might feel the pressure from the media, for example, as they it might be just like the highlight other athletes doing it, so he feels like, oh, I need to do it to be as good as them, or he might just think that he's not good enough and that he needs to do it. But however, if he does increase his power naturally, and the talent identification, it can enable him to maybe get chosen for, if he has world-class podium, which is in the 4 years he can be on, maybe like, for example, the Olympics podium for a medal, or there is podium potential, which is within 8 years of getting on a podium, if he continues to increase his power. For this training program, he can go and train at national institutes, which is, for example, Sheffield near us, and this is easily got to in today's society, as most family has one car, and compared to pre-1850, which only the upper class had horse drawn carriages and the poor had to walk, and they couldn't really travel that far. They might have just stayed in the town itself or the town over. And by having and there is more money to spare now in today's society, and time enabling them to get to the morning or night sessions, compared to pre-1850, where they worked long hours and had any time. But in post-1850, they did start having Wednesday and Saturday afternoons off to play sport. But because they were exhausted from working, and they couldn't really travel far, they didn't really play. And in the 1850s, because if he continued to increase his power and go to Olympics, he could then maybe decide to become a professional, and this was seen as a negative by gentle amateurs, as they thought it was vulgar to be paid to play sport. So, but in today's society, there is a wider range, as athletes can now get paid a good amount just to train alone. So my training program needs to be done to increase adaptations for powering underwater alone, but he needs to make sure that he is doing his normal training sessions along with it, as my training program that I have just done is just done for one swimming session a week and one gym session a week, so he can fit the rest of his normal training in with it.